to inherit. You must live as my granddaughter." The words hung in the air of the lawyer's office, thick and suffocating like the smell of old paper and lemon polish. I stared at Mr. Abernathy, a man who looked like he'd been carved from the same ancient oak as his desk, expecting him to crack a smile, to tell me it was some bizarre, misplaced joke. He didn't. His face remained a mask of professional solemnity, his gaze steady over the top of his half-moon glasses. "My name is Leo Ward. I'm 24 years old, and my life, up until that exact moment, had been a neat and tidy spreadsheet of predictable outcomes. I'm a data analyst. I find comfort in numbers, in patterns, in the logical progression from cause to effect. My world is binary, yes or no, true or false. There is no room for ambiguity. And yet here I was, drowning in it. My mom sat beside me, her hand a tense knot on her purse, her breath hitched. "I'm sorry. Harold," she said, her voice a little shaky. "Could you repeat that last part? I think I must have misheard." Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat, the sound rustling like dry leaves. He adjusted the document in his hands. "The last will and testament of my grandmother, Rose Ward, of course, Sarah, the clause is quite specific. All my worldly assets, including the business and property known as the Hidden Silk Atelier, and all capital therein, shall pass to my only grandson, Leo Ward, under one condition, and one condition only, that for a period of 100 consecutive days, he shall live and work at the atelier, residing in the apartment above it, not as himself, but in the full and complete role of my granddaughter, Leah." Leah, not even a real person, a phantom granddaughter fabricated for the sake of what? A posthumous prank, a test of character so esoteric it bordered on madness. My mind raced, trying to compute the variables. Grandmother Rose wasn't mad, eccentric. Yes, she was a world-renowned designer, a woman who spoke in metaphors about the soul of a fabric and the ambition of a seam. She saw the world through a different lens than I did. Where I saw data points, she saw color and texture and light. We loved each other fiercely, but we never quite understood each other's language. Still, this was beyond eccentricity. This was a full-blown departure from reality. "A granddaughter," I finally managed to say, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "She never had a granddaughter. She only had you, Mom, and you only had me." "I'm aware of the genealogy. Leo," Mr. Abernathy said, his tone dry. "The name Leah is specified here. The will is ironclad. Your grandmother had it drafted and revised 3 times over the last 5 years. Her mind was perfectly sound, as attested by 2 physicians and a psychiatrist." He slid a thick manila envelope across the polished desk towards me. It was sealed with a wax stamp bearing the intricate HS logo of her atelier. My name was written on the front in her familiar, elegant script, though the lines wavered slightly, a testament to her failing strength in those final weeks. "She left this for you, for your eyes only," the lawyer instructed. My fingers felt clumsy as I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored stationery, the scent of lavender and old silk. Her signature scent rose from the paper, and for a second, the grief I'd been holding at bay since her funeral washed over me in a fresh, painful wave. Her handwriting, the same script that had filled my birthday cards with loving, if slightly cryptic, messages for 24 years, filled the page. "My dearest Leo, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are likely very confused. Do not think of this as a burden, my love. Think of it as a key, all your life. You have seen the world in black and white. In columns and rows, it's a safe way to live. But it is not the whole picture. I am leaving you my legacy, but it is a legacy you cannot understand with your mind alone. You must feel it. You must experience it. You have never truly seen yourself, Leo. You see the reflection you expect to see, to understand what I've built, to grasp the true value of what I am leaving you. You must learn to touch the world as I did. You must learn to see it not just through my eyes, but with the hands of a woman. You must walk in her shoes. Be Leah for 100 days. Find her, understand her, and in doing so, you might finally find the parts of yourself you never knew were missing. This is not a punishment. It is my final gift to you. With all my love, forever, Grandma Rose. I read it twice, then a third time, The lawyer's words were cold, legal jargon, but these words, these were hers. They resonated with a strange, aching sincerity. She wasn't being cruel. She genuinely believed this was important. She thought this bizarre, humiliating task would help me. My mother read the letter over my shoulder, her hand coming to rest on my back. "Oh, Rosie," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Always the dramatics. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "Leo, you don't have to do this. It's insane. We can contest it." Mr. Abernathy coughed delicately. "Contesting it would be difficult and expensive. As I said, the will is legally sound. If Leo refuses the condition, the entire estate, including the atelier, will be liquidated, and the proceeds donated to the Havenport Artists Collective. That is the default clause." I felt a jolt. The Hidden Silk Atelier wasn't just a building or a business. It was my grandmother's heart and soul made tangible. It was the place I'd spent countless childhood afternoons, hiding amongst bolts of shimmering silk and breathing in the scent of hot irons and chalk. It was her life's work, a sanctuary of beauty in the quiet, historic town of Havenport. To let it all be sold off, scattered to the winds, it felt like a betrayal. I looked from my mother's worried face to the lawyer's impassive one, and then down at my grandmother's letter. "You have never truly seen yourself." The line snagged in my brain. What did that even mean? I saw myself every morning in the mirror. Leo Ward, brown hair, blue eyes, 5'11", data analyst, logical, practical, known. But what if she was right? What if there was more? The analyst in me started weighing the pros and cons. Pro, inherit a multi-million-dollar business and property, preserve my grandmother's legacy. Con, endure 100 days of what would surely be profound, soul-crushing humiliation, live a lie, become someone else entirely. Logically, the con column was screaming at me. It was absurd, degrading, impossible. I didn't know the first thing about being a woman. I didn't know how to run a fashion atelier. I didn't even know how to thread a needle, a fact my grandmother had often lamented. But then there was her letter. This is not a punishment. It is my final gift. A strange, unwelcome flicker of curiosity sparked within me. It was the same feeling I got when I stumbled upon an anomaly in a data set, a single point of information that defied the pattern and hinted at a deeper hidden story. This whole situation was the biggest anomaly of my life. What would it be like to walk through the world and have it see you as someone else, to move differently, to speak differently, to be seen differently? The question was terrifying, but it was also compelling. I took a deep breath, the air in the stuffy office suddenly feeling thin. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'll do it." My mother gasped. "Leo, honey, are you sure you don't have to?" "I'm sure, Mom," I said, looking her in the eye. "It's what she wanted, and I need to understand why." Mr. Abernathy gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He pushed another document towards me. "Very well, this is the agreement, outlining the terms. You will move into the apartment above the atelier tomorrow. Mrs. Helen Gable, your grandmother's longtime associate and head seamstress, has been briefed on the situation. She will be your guide and your warden, so to speak. She will be the sole arbiter of whether you are fulfilling the full and complete role of Leah. Her word is final. If she determines you have broken the terms, the 100-day period is void. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said, my heart starting to pound a nervous rhythm against my ribs. A guide and a warden. This was really happening. "You are not to reveal your true identity to anyone in Havenport, outside of Mrs. Gable," he continued. "To the world. You are Leah Ward, your grandmother's estranged granddaughter, who has come to take over the family business. Your life as Leo Ward must effectively cease to exist for the duration." Cease to exist. The phrase sent a chill down my spine. For the next 100 days, I wasn't me. I was a ghost. And in my place would stand a woman I hadn't even met yet. A woman named Leah. I picked up the pen. The plastic felt slick and foreign in my suddenly sweaty hand. As I signed my name Leo Ward on the line, it felt less like an acceptance and more like a surrender. I was signing away my name, my identity, my entire known reality, all for a dead woman's cryptic promise of a gift I couldn't begin to comprehend. The logical part of my brain was screaming that I had just made the biggest mistake of my life, but another, quieter part, a part that sounded suspiciously like my grandmother's gentle voice, whispered that my real life was only just about to begin. The trip to Havenport the next day was a blur of gray highway and the low hum of my car's engine, with every mile that brought me closer to the hidden silk atelier. The reality of what I was about to do settled heavier in my stomach. I'd packed a small bag, mostly with toiletries. What was the point of packing my own clothes? Leo's clothes would have no place in Leah's world. Havenport was exactly as I remembered it from childhood visits, a postcard-perfect town of cobblestone streets, gas lamp-style fixtures, and historic brick buildings with colorful awnings. The hidden silk atelier was nestled in the heart of the town square, its large picture window displaying a single, breathtaking gown of midnight blue silk that seemed to drink the afternoon light. I parked the car in the alley behind the shop, my hands shaking so badly I fumbled with the keys, taking a deep breath. I walked to the back entrance, a heavy oak door with a small tarnished brass plaque that read Gable. The door opened before I could knock. Standing there was Helen Gable. She was a woman who seemed to be made of angles and tightly wound energy. Her silver hair was pinned in a severe bun, and her eyes, the color of faded denim, missed nothing. She'd been my grandmother's right hand for over 40 years, a silent, formidable presence in the background of my childhood visits. She'd always intimidated me. Today was no exception. She looked me up and down, her expression unreadable. "You're late," she said, her voice crisp and without welcome. "The traffic on the interstate," I started. "Excuses are a luxury we don't have," she cut me off. Stepping aside to let me in, "The clock started this morning. This is day 1 of 100. The air inside smelled of home, that unique blend of lavender, hot metal, and fabric that was the essence of my grandmother. But there was no comfort in it today. Helen led me through the main workshop, where sewing machines stood like silent sentinels and half-finished garments draped over dress forms like sleeping ghosts. We went up a narrow, winding staircase to the apartment above. It was my grandmother's space, filled with her personality velvet chairs, shelves overflowing with books on art and history, and sketches pinned to every available surface. But it had been prepared for a new resident. My resident, Leah's. "Your old life ends here," Helen stated, gesturing around the room. "Your phone, laptop, wallet." I hesitated, my hand hovering over my pocket. My phone was my connection to everything, to my friends, my job, my identity. Helen's gaze was like steel. Leah wouldn't have Leo's contacts. She wouldn't have his credit cards. She is starting fresh. The will is clear, a full and complete role. No half measures. Reluctantly, I placed my digital lifeline on the coffee table. My wallet followed. I felt stripped naked, disconnected from the entire framework of my existence. Helen picked them up and locked them in a small safe in the corner. "Good," she said with a curt nod. "Now let's begin. We'll make you her, from the outside in." She led me not to the closet, but to a smaller, adjoining room I'd never been in before. It was a large professional fitting room, lined with mirrors on 3 walls. In the center of the room, laid out on a velvet chaise lounge, was an assortment of items that made my throat go dry. It looked like a collection of surgical instruments and strange, flesh-toned sculptures. "If you want to complete this, you will accept the entire process," Helen said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "This is not about putting on a dress. It's about building a new form. Both your body and your mind must be convinced." She picked up the first item. It was a corset, an intricate thing of lace and bone-colored satin. It looked delicate, almost beautiful, but I knew it was a cage. "Take off your shirt and jeans," she commanded. I did as I was told, my movements stiff and awkward under her watchful eye. I stood there in my t-shirt and boxers, feeling exposed and foolish. She motioned for me to remove the t-shirt as well. The air in the room felt cold on my bare skin. "Turn around." I turned, facing the mirrors. She wrapped the corset around my midsection. It was cool against my skin. Then she began to pull the laces at the back. The tightening was gradual at first, a firm pressure. Then it became a vice. She pulled, and the air whooshed out of my lungs. "Breathe," she commanded, her voice sharp. I tried to take a deep breath, but I couldn't. My diaphragm was constricted, my breaths became short, shallow things, trapped in the top of my chest. She pulled the laces again, tying them off in a series of knots. "This will be your new center," she said, her voice right behind my ear. "It will correct your posture. A man stands from his shoulders, a woman stands from her hips. This will force you to remember that." I looked at my reflection. My waist was cinched into an almost comical degree, creating a curve where none had existed before. It felt profoundly, disturbingly wrong. Next, she picked up 2 pieces of molded silicone. They were cool and heavy in her hands. "Hip pads," she announced. She showed me the special compression shorts they slid into, pockets positioning them perfectly over my own narrow hips. The moment they were in place, the change in my silhouette was instantaneous and shocking. The tight waist of the corset now flowed into a distinctly feminine curve. It was like looking at a stranger's body with my head attached. The silicone was cold at first, a foreign weight, but as it warmed to my body temperature, a bizarre sensation washed over me. It felt less like I was wearing something and more like my own flesh had been reshaped. Then came the most surreal part. She opened a box to reveal a pair of silicone breast forms. They were soft, pliable, and unnervingly realistic, right down to the subtle coloring. "Adhesive," she said, holding up a small bottle of medical-grade glue. "It will hold them in place. You will learn to live with them. They are part of you now." The application was a cold, clinical process. I stared at the ceiling, trying to disconnect my mind from what was happening, but I couldn't ignore the new weight on my chest. A gentle, persistent pressure that altered my balance. When she was done, she had me look in the mirror again. I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. The shape was completely alien, the tight waist, the curved hips, the soft swell of a chest. It was the outline of a woman. My brain short-circuited trying to reconcile the image with the person I knew I was. A wave of nausea and panic rose in my throat. "It's just a costume," I whispered to myself, my voice hoarse. "No," Helen said, her reflection watching me intently. "It is a foundation. A costume can be taken off at the end of the night. This you will wear every day. You will sleep in the lighter corset. You will become accustomed to the weight. The feel. You will forget you are wearing it. That is the goal." Finally, she brought over the dress. It was the same one from the window, the one of midnight blue silk. It felt light as air, cool and impossibly smooth. She helped me into it, the fabric gliding over the new curves of my body. It settled perfectly, the cut designed for the exact silhouette she had just constructed. She led me to a vanity table and sat me down. For the next hour, she worked on my face with a focused, artistic intensity. Foundation, concealer, a subtle blush, mascara that made my eyelashes brush against my skin, and a soft, rose-colored lipstick. Then came the wig. It was a beautiful, shoulder-length style in a warm brown, with soft waves that framed the face. She settled it onto my head, adjusted it, and then stepped back. "Now," she said, "look." I lifted my head and looked in the mirror. And I saw her. It wasn't me anymore. Leah was gone, buried under layers of silk, silicone, and meticulously applied makeup. The person in the mirror was a stranger, a woman. Her eyes, my eyes, looked wide and startled. Her face was softer, the angles of my jaw less pronounced. Her body was a series of gentle curves. She was pretty. The thought was so unexpected it felt like a punch to the gut. This was Leah. "It's not enough to wear her skin," Helen said, her voice softer now, almost gentle. "You have to move like you were born in it. Stand up, walk to the door and back." I stood, my balance completely off. The corset forced me to stand ramrod straight. The new weight on my chest and hips made me feel clumsy, like a puppet with tangled strings. I took a step, my usual long stride, and almost tripped on the hem of the dress. "No," Helen corrected instantly. "Smaller steps. Your center of gravity has shifted. Swing your hips just a little. Let the dress move with you. Shoulders back and relaxed. Don't lead with your chin." We spent the next hour just walking, back and forth, turn, back and forth. It was maddeningly difficult. Every instinct I had about how to occupy space, how to move my own body, was wrong. I was fighting against 24 years of muscle memory. After the walking came the voice. She had me sit down and practice speaking, not from my chest but from my head. Higher pitch, softer delivery. Smile when you talk. It changes the resonance. I tried. The sounds that came out felt fake. A ridiculous falsetto. Again, she insisted. We practiced simple phrases. Hello, my name is Leah. It's a pleasure to meet you. May I have a cup of tea? Each one felt more absurd than the last. Finally, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the workshop floor, she seemed satisfied. It's a start, she conceded. A very rough start. Every night, before you sleep, you will stand in front of that mirror for 10 minutes and you will speak to your reflection. You will say, I am Leah. You will say it until you believe it, or at least, until you can say it without flinching. That night, alone in my grandmother's apartment, I did as she said. I stood before the full-length mirror, a stranger in a silk nightgown. The corset was gone, replaced by a lighter, less restrictive one, but the breast forms were still there, a constant, weighty reminder. I looked at the woman in the glass. Her expression was a mixture of exhaustion, fear, and a deep, profound confusion. I am Leah, I whispered. The words felt like a lie, a betrayal of everything I was. My voice was a strained, unfamiliar sound. I felt a cocktail of emotions I couldn't even begin to name. Shame, hot and prickly, crawling up my neck. A bizarre sense of detachment, as if I was watching a movie about someone else. And underneath it all, a tiny, terrifying spark of something else, something that wasn't negative. A strange, unsettling lightness. I took a breath, the movement restricted by the garment around my ribs, and tried again, forcing the higher pitch Helen had drilled into me. I am Leah. The woman in the mirror just stared back, her eyes full of my own panic. We had 99 more days to go. The world looked different when I wore her skin. That's the first thing I learned. For 3 days, Helen kept me cloistered inside the atelier. 3 days of relentless training. Walking in heels, a specific kind of torture I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Learning how to sit, how to stand, how to pick something up off the floor without looking like a folding construction crane. My entire body ached with the effort of holding itself in a new way. My vocal cords were raw from hours of voice practice. By the end of day 3, I could look at myself in the mirror and say, I am Leah without my voice cracking. It still felt like I was playing a part in a very strange play, but at least I was starting to learn my lines. On the morning of the 4th day, Helen stood before me with an inspecting gaze. I was dressed in a simple but elegant outfit. She'd chosen a cream-colored A-line skirt that fell just below my knees, a soft cashmere sweater in a dusty rose color, and low, sensible heels. The wig was brushed and styled. My makeup was subtle and flawless. Today, you go out, she announced. Leah needs to buy groceries. She needs to open a bank account. She needs to exist outside these 4 walls. A cold dread washed over me. Inside the atelier, this was a controlled experiment. Outside, it was a performance without a safety net. Every person I passed on the street would be an audience member, a potential critic ready to spot the fraud. I don't think I'm ready, I said, my voice coming out in the higher register I'd been practicing. It sounded thin and reedy to my own ears. You're not, Helen replied bluntly, but you won't be ready until you do it. Go to the farmer's market in the square, buy some vegetables, then go to the bank on the corner, then come back. Do not speak unless spoken to. Keep your answers short and polite. And for God's sake, remember your steps. She handed me a purse. It felt alien in my hand. The weight of it, the way it was meant to be held. Inside was a small amount of cash and a single key to the shop. I looked at my reflection one last time in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back was nervous, her shoulders a little too tense, but she looked real, plausible. The bell above the shop door chimed as I stepped out onto the cobblestone street of Havenport. The morning air was crisp with the scent of autumn and brewing coffee from the cafe next door. The sun felt warm on my face. For a moment, I forgot the artifice, and then a couple walked past me. and the man's eyes flickered over me for a half-second, a casual, dismissive glance. And in that half-second, my entire world shifted. He hadn't seen Leah Ward. He hadn't seen a man. He'd seen a woman, and his brain had cataloged her as such and moved on. He hadn't looked twice. The invisibility was terrifying, but it was also a shield. As long as I didn't draw attention, I could pass. I walked toward the town square, focusing on Helen's instructions, small steps, hips moving slightly, shoulders back. It felt like I was trying to solve a complex equation with my body. I was so focused on the mechanics of walking that I barely noticed the world around me. The farmer's market was a bustle of activity. I bought a bundle of carrots and some apples from a friendly-looking woman, managing a polite smile and a quiet thank you. My voice sounded shaky, but she didn't seem to notice. One hurdle cleared. The bank was next. The air conditioning inside was a shock after the warm sun. The line was short. When my turn came, I approached the teller, a young woman with a bored expression. "I'd like to open a new account," I said, my voice a little too loud in the quiet bank. "Of course," she said, not looking up from her computer. "Name?" Leah Ward." I do. My heart stopped. The ID, I didn't have one. Helen hadn't mentioned an ID. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. This was it. This was where it all fell apart. I just moved to town. I stammered, my carefully practiced voice dissolving into a nervous squeak. "My things haven't arrived yet. I'm staying at the Hidden Silk Atelier. Rose Ward was my grandmother." The teller finally looked up at me. Her bored expression softened into one of sympathy. "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. Mrs. Ward was a town icon. Everyone loved her." She looked at me more closely. "You have her eyes." The compliment landed with a bizarre mix of relief and profound discomfort. "Thank you," I mumbled. "Look, technically, I need photo ID," she said, lowering her voice. "But Mr. Abernathy, her lawyer, is also the bank's lawyer. He sent over a packet about the estate. Let me see." She typed something into her computer. A moment later, she nodded. "Yep, it's all here. Leah Ward, sole proprietor. We can use the estate documents to get you started. We'll just need you to bring in your driver's license once you get it." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I spent the next 10 minutes signing forms, my signature a looping. Unfamiliar Leah Ward the whole time. I was acutely aware of my hands, which suddenly looked too big, too masculine. I tried to curl my fingers to make them look smaller. By the time I walked out of the bank and back into the sunlight, I was emotionally and physically drained. It felt like I'd just run a marathon, but I had done it. I had interacted with the world as Leah, and the world had accepted it. I decided to reward myself with a coffee before heading back. There was a small, cozy-looking place called the Daily Grind with a few tables on the sidewalk. I ordered a latte, my voice more confident this time, and took a seat at a small iron table. As I sat there, trying to relax, a man at the next table looked over at me. He had a friendly, open face, kind eyes, and a camera hanging around his neck. "Sorry to bother you," he said, his voice warm. "I'm a photographer. My name's Noah. I'm working on a project, a collection of portraits called Faces of Havenport, and you have a really interesting look. There's a story in your eyes." My blood ran cold. A story in my eyes? He had no idea. My first instinct was to say no, to run. Being photographed felt like putting my disguise under a microscope. But then he smiled, a genuine, unassuming smile. "The light is perfect right now," he said, gesturing to the way the afternoon sun filtered through the leaves of the oak tree overhead. It would just be a few shots, no pressure at all. Something made me hesitate. Maybe it was the exhaustion from the morning's trials. Maybe it was the sheer absurdity of it all. Or maybe it was the way he was looking at me. He wasn't looking at me like the man at the market had, with a dismissive glance. He was seeing me. Or at least, he was seeing Leah. And his gaze wasn't judgmental. It was appreciative, curious. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, someone was looking at Leah with something that resembled admiration. "Okay," I heard myself say, the word coming out in Leah's soft voice. His face lit up. "Great, just stay right there. Don't even move." He lifted his camera, The sound of the shutter clicking was loud in the quiet afternoon. I didn't know what to do with my hands, my face. I felt my expression freeze into a stiff, awkward mask. "Relax," Noah said gently. "Just think about something pleasant. Think about why you came to Havenport." I couldn't think about why I came to Havenport, but I could invent a reason for Leah. I imagined her arriving in this quiet town to take over her grandmother's legacy. I pictured her feeling a sense of purpose, of belonging. I let that imagined feeling settle over me, and I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. I looked away from the camera, towards the storefront of the hidden silk atelier down the street, and let a small, wistful smile touch my lips. Click. "That's it," Noah said, his voice excited. "That's beautiful, perfect." He took a few more shots, then lowered his camera. "Thank you. Seriously, I'll edit these tonight. Can I email you a copy?" I gave him the new email address Helen had set up for me. We chatted for a few more minutes. He was a local, born and raised. He made his living doing commercial photography, but his passion was portraiture. He was easy to talk to, and for a few minutes, I almost forgot the corset digging into my ribs and the unfamiliar weight on my chest. I was just a person having a conversation, a woman. That evening, back in the solitude of the apartment, an email popped up. It was from Noah. Attached was a single black and white photograph. I clicked on it and my breath caught in my throat. It was the woman from the coffee shop. It was Leah, but it wasn't the stiff, terrified fraud I felt like. The woman in the photo looked serene. There was a quiet strength in her gaze, a hint of a story in her melancholic smile. She looked like she belonged there. Sitting at that cafe on that sunny afternoon, she looked like a real person. I stared at the image for a long time, my mind reeling. Noah's lens hadn't seen a man in a dress. It had captured something else entirely. It had captured Leah, and looking at her, really looking at her through a stranger's eyes, I felt a shocking jolt of empathy. For her, for this person I was supposed to be. That night, standing in front of the mirror, the words came easily, without thought, without rehearsal. "I am Leah," I said to the woman in the glass. And for the first time, it didn't feel entirely like a lie. I was beginning to see her not as my disguise, but as a person in her own right, and in my thoughts. A subtle but significant shift occurred when I thought about my day, about the walk to the bank, about the conversation with Noah. I didn't think, today. I walked outside. I thought, today. She did. Part 4, Threads of the Past. The days settled into a strange new rhythm. Mornings were spent with Helen, who was a ruthless teacher. She taught me not just how to walk and talk, but the fundamentals of the atelier itself. I learned about the different types of silk charmeuse, chiffon, crepe de chine, and how each one draped and fell differently. I learned how to identify a well-set sleeve, the importance of an invisible hem, and the subtle language of stitches. My hands, accustomed to the smooth, cold surface of a keyboard, were clumsy with a needle and thread, but I slowly, painstakingly, learned. Afternoons were for being Leah in the world. I ran errands, managed the shop's finances, and met with suppliers. Each interaction was a test, a new scene in the long improvisation of Leah's life. With each successful conversation, each moment I passed without being questioned, my confidence grew. I started to inhabit Leah more fully, the persona becoming less of a rigid costume and more like a second skin. I even saw Noah again. He came by the shop a week after our first meeting, a print of the photograph he'd taken in his hands. "I wanted to give you this," he said, his smile as warm as I remembered. "It's one of my favorites from the whole project so far." "It's lovely," I said, looking at the image of Leah. "You're very talented." "The subject makes it easy," he replied, and I felt a blush rise in my cheeks, a physical reaction so alien and involuntary it startled me. He stayed for almost an hour, asking about my grandmother and my plans for the atelier. I found myself weaving a believable backstory for Leah, drawing on my own genuine love for my grandmother, but filtering it through this new identity. It was surprisingly easy. Noah was a good listener, and his presence was calming. When he left, I found myself hoping he'd come back again. It was during the third week, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, that I made the discovery. Helen had tasked me with organizing the old stockroom in the attic. A dusty, forgotten space piled high with dress forms from bygone eras, bolts of vintage fabric, and old hat boxes. In the back corner, tucked away in an old leather trunk, I found it. It was a thick, leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. The front was embossed with my grandmother's initials, R.W. It wasn't one of her design sketchbooks. I knew those well. This felt different, more personal. I sat down on the dusty floor, the sound of the rain drumming on the roof above, and opened it. The first entry was dated nearly 60 years ago, when she was just a young woman starting her business. Her familiar script, so much stronger and more fluid than in her final letter to me, filled the pages. At first, it was what I expected: notes about clients, frustrations with suppliers, sketches of early designs. But as I read on, a different story began to emerge, a secret history stitched between the lines of her professional life. She wrote about a client, a young woman named Eleanor, who came to her in tears. Eleanor was trapped in an abusive, arranged marriage to a wealthy, powerful man. She was desperate to escape, but he watched her every move. She had no money of her own, no way out. My grandmother wrote, I cannot unsee the fear in her eyes. The world puts women in gilded cages and calls it protection. I cannot break the bars of her cage, but perhaps I can make her a key. The next few entries detailed her plan. She designed a modest, unassuming traveling suit for Eleanor, but she also designed something else, a boy's suit, perfectly tailored. She taught Eleanor how to bind her chest, how to cut her hair short under a cap, how to walk with a confident swagger. She used her skills not just to create beauty, but to create a disguise, a new identity. The last entry about her described watching from her window as a confident young man. Mr. Evan walked to the train station and disappeared into the crowd, on his way to a new life in a different city. My hands were shaking as I turned the pages. There were more stories, a dozen of them, spread out over decades. Women escaping controlling families, oppressive relationships, lives that were not their own. My grandmother had been their secret benefactor, her atelier a sanctuary, her needle and thread the tools of their liberation. She used her artistry to give them the one thing they craved most: freedom. The freedom to be unseen, to blend in, to start over as someone else. Then, about halfway through the journal, a new name appeared: Clara. The entries about Clara were different. The tone shifted from one of compassionate detachment to one of deep, personal affection. Clara was an artist, a painter who saw the world in vibrant, unapologetic color. Their conversations, their shared laughter, their arguments about art and life, it was all there on the page. Clara came to the studio today. One entry read, she brought me a painting of the sea at dawn. She says, I am like the ocean, calm on the surface but with a world of hidden depths. I feel more known by her than I have by anyone else in my entire life. It was a love story, written in the coded, careful language of a time when such love dared not speak its name. I read about their clandestine meetings, their shared dreams of traveling to Paris, the way Clara's hand felt in hers. There was a pressed flower, a faded violet, tucked between two pages. And then the heartbreak. Clara's family, suspicious of their unnatural closeness, had forced her to marry a man, to move away. The final entry about her was just a few words, the ink smudged as if by tears. She is gone. The color has gone out of the world. I closed the journal, my own tears blurring the dusty attic light. I sat there for a long time, the weight of my grandmother's secret history pressing down on me. This whole time, I had seen her as a brilliant designer, an eccentric but loving grandmother. I had never seen this woman this quiet revolutionary, this heartbroken lover, this champion of hidden identities. And suddenly, the will made a different kind of sense. People will only see what you show them, but you must know who you are, even when you are in disguise. This line, from a later entry, seemed to be written directly to me. Her strange condition, the 100 days as Leah, wasn't a whim. It was a lesson. It was her way of teaching me, in the only way she knew how, the most important truth she had ever learned. She wanted me to understand empathy not as an abstract concept, but as a lived experience. She wanted me to understand what it felt like to be someone else, to walk in their shoes, to feel the world shift around you based on the shape you present. She wanted me to understand the power of transformation, the freedom and the burden of a hidden self. It wasn't about humiliating me. It was about connecting me to the deepest, most secret part of her legacy, the part that had nothing to do with silk and everything to do with the strength it takes to create a new self in a world that tries to keep you in a cage. I picked up the journal, holding it to my chest. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of sunlight cut through the dusty attic window. In that moment, I felt closer to my grandmother than I ever had in her life. The shame I'd been carrying around for the past 3 weeks, the feeling of being a fraud, began to dissolve. It was replaced by a sense of purpose, a feeling of being part of a story much larger and more important than my own. I wasn't just Leo playing a part. I was Leah, walking a path my grandmother had laid out for me, a path she herself had walked in her own way. The disguise was no longer just a condition of a will, it was an inheritance in itself. With the discovery of the journal, my perspective shifted. The daily ritual of becoming Leah was no longer a chore, but an act of homage. When Helen tightened my corset, I thought of the women my grandmother had helped bind their chests to escape. When I practiced my voice, I thought of the new identity she helped create. The atelier became a sacred space. Every bolt of fabric, every spool of thread, a part of her secret history. This newfound sense of purpose fueled a change in me. I was no longer just going through the motions. I began to take an active interest in the shop, not just as a temporary custodian, but as a potential heir to its true legacy. I spent hours studying my grandmother's old sketchbooks, trying to understand her design philosophy. Her work was about more than just aesthetics. It was about creating clothes that empowered the wearer. That told a story. My growing confidence, however, was not welcomed by everyone. There were 3 other seamstresses at the atelier, all of whom had worked with my grandmother for years. 2 of them, Maria and Sophia, were kind and supportive, treating me with a gentle deference as Miss Ward, but the third, a young man named Kevin, was another story. Kevin was a talented tailor, technically brilliant, but he lacked my grandmother's artistry. He was ambitious and had clearly expected to be the one to take over the creative direction of the atelier after her death. And he did not like taking orders from me. From Leah, he saw me as an interloper, an unqualified novice who'd inherited the throne by sheer luck of birth. His resentment was a constant, low-level hum in the workshop, expressed through subtle condescension and dismissive sighs whenever I offered a creative opinion. As Leah gained more confidence, his hostility grew more overt. He would challenge my decisions on fabric choices, question my understanding of a client's needs, and make snide remarks just loud enough for me to hear about Nepo babies who didn't know a dart from a pleat. I tried to ignore him, focusing on my work and on earning the respect of the others. The breaking point came during the 2nd month. We were working on a custom gown for a wealthy client, and I had suggested a small but significant change to the neckline. An idea I'd gotten from one of my grandmother's early, more experimental sketches. Helen had loved the idea. Kevin had fought it, arguing it was impractical. We were in the main workshop, the client's gown gleaming on a dress form under the bright lights. Helen had stepped out to take a call. I was pinning the fabric to test the new neckline, and Kevin was watching me, his arms crossed, a sneer on his face. "You're gonna ruin it," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You have no idea what you're doing. You just waltz in here, playing dress up, and think you can just take over her life's work." "I'm not playing," I said, my voice steady, trying to maintain the calm demeanor of Leah. "This is what the client wants, and it's a better design." "A better design," he scoffed, his voice getting louder. "You wouldn't know a good design if it slapped you across your perfectly pouted face. It's all a joke to you, isn't it, coming in here, pretending to be this thing?" His words were getting sharper, more personal. I could feel the eyes of the other seamstresses on us. "Kevin, that's enough," I said, my voice tight. But he was too far gone, his jealousy and frustration boiling over. He took a step closer, his face twisted in a mask of pure spite. "Enough, I haven't even started," he spat. "Everyone here walks on eggshells around you, pretending you're some long-lost granddaughter. It's pathetic, we all know what you are." He pointed a shaking finger at me, and his voice rose to a shout that echoed through the high-ceilinged workshop. "You're just a joke, a fraud. You're a man in a dress." The words hit me with the physical force of a slap. A man in a dress. The 3 words I had been running from for 67 days. The deepest, most terrified thought in the back of my own mind, now weaponized and hurled at me in a room full of people. The air went still. Maria and Sophia looked horrified. The silence was deafening, broken only by Kevin's heavy breathing. In that moment, all the confidence I had built, all the connection I had felt to my grandmother's legacy, evaporated. The persona of Leah shattered like cheap glass. I was no longer a woman inheriting her grandmother's legacy. I was just Leo Ward, a data analyst in a wig and a padded bra, and everyone knew it. The shame was suffocating, a hot, acrid poison filling my lungs. I didn't say a word. I dropped the pins I was holding. They scattered across the wooden floor with a sound like tiny breaking bones. I turned and walked, not with Leah's measured steps, but with my own frantic stride, nearly tripping over my heels. I ran up the stairs to the apartment and slammed the door, the sound echoing the shattering of my composure. I stumbled to the bathroom and stared at the stranger in the mirror, but now, all I could see was the lie. I saw the line of the wig, the paint on my face, the artificial curves of my body. Kevin's words played on a loop in my head. A man in a dress, a joke, a fraud. With trembling, furious hands, I began to dismantle her. I ripped the wig from my head. Tossing it to the floor, I scrubbed at my face with a towel, smearing the makeup until I was a blotchy, tear-streaked mess. I unlaced the corset, gasping as my lungs filled with air for the first time in hours. I tore off the dress, the pads, the breast forms, leaving them in a heap of silk and silicone on the floor. I stood there in my underwear, looking at my reflection again, and I saw Leo. Just Leo, thin, pale, and utterly hollowed out. The reflection was a comfort and a devastation all at once. This was it. I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. It was too hard, too humiliating. My grandmother had asked too much. I would call Mr. Abernathy in the morning, tell him I was quitting, let them liquidate the atelier. It wasn't worth this. It wasn't worth the bone-deep agony of being exposed as a lie. Later that evening, there was a soft knock on the door. It was Helen. I didn't answer, but she used her own key to let herself in. She found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of Leah. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at the discarded clothes, then at me. Her expression wasn't angry or disappointed. It was understanding. She sat down in the velvet armchair across from me. "Kevin has been dismissed," she said quietly. I just shook my head, not looking at her. It doesn't matter. He was right. "No," she said, her voice firm. "He was cruel. There is a difference." She was quiet for a long moment, and then she began to speak, telling me a story about my grandmother. "About 20 years ago," she began, "Rose was working on the most important commission of her career, a wedding gown for a European princess. She had sourced a bolt of pure white silk from Italy, a fabric so rare and expensive it was practically a legend. She spent a week just creating the design, and another week cutting the pattern. On the day she was about to make the first stitch, she was working late, tired. She pricked her finger with a needle, and a single, perfect drop of her blood fell right onto the center of the bodice. I looked up, intrigued despite myself. The fabric was ruined," Helen continued, "a single red dot on a field of perfect white. It was irreplaceable. I told her to throw it out, that we would have to start over, to tell the palace there was a delay. But she refused. She stared at that drop of blood for the longest time, and then she went to her thread cabinet. She selected a dozen shades of red and pink silk thread, and right there, with that drop of blood as the center, she embroidered a single, magnificent rose, so intricate and lifelike it seemed to be blooming from the fabric itself. She called it the maker's mark." Helen leaned forward, her gaze intense. When she was finished, she told me, "Helen, nothing perfect is ever truly interesting. True creation, true beauty, is never flawless. It is born from our wounds. We don't hide the scars, we turn them into part of the design." Her words settled over me, a balm on my raw, exposed soul, my wound. Kevin's words were a wound, my shame. my confusion, my dual identity, it was all a wound, and I had been trying to hide it, to pretend it didn't exist, to create a perfect, flawless Leah. But maybe that was never the point. What Kevin said, "It hurt you," Helen said, her voice softening, "because a part of you believed it. You have been treating Leah like a mask, but she is not a mask. Leo, she is the embroidery over the wound. She is a part of the design. She does not hide you. She completes you." Understanding dawned, slow and painful, but clear as day. This whole experience, the pain and the confusion, it wasn't something to be hidden or overcome. It was the raw material. It was the drop of blood on the silk. My grandmother didn't want me to just become a flawless woman for 100 days. She wanted me to integrate the experience, the hurt, the vulnerability, into who I was. I looked at the discarded wig, the lifeless dress on the floor. I had been trying to play Leah, a role, but it wasn't a role. It was a part of me now. The shame I felt wasn't about being discovered as a man. It was about feeling like an imposter in my own life, in both skins. Slowly, painfully, I stood up. I walked over to the heap on the floor. I picked up the breast forms, the corset, the dress. This time, there was no revulsion. There was no sense of playing a part. I began to put her back on, piece by piece. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't about hiding Leo anymore. It wasn't about performing for Helen or the town or my grandmother's will. It was about existing. When I was fully dressed, I looked in the mirror. I saw Leah again, but this time, I saw Leo inside her eyes. I saw our shared vulnerability, our shared strength. They weren't two different people anymore. They were two parts of a single, complicated, and wounded whole. And I understood. It wasn't about choosing one over the other. It was about finding a way to be both. The incident with Kevin, as painful as it was, became a crucible. The fire of that humiliation burned away the last of my pretense. I was no longer just fulfilling a condition. I was on a mission. The idea of simply preserving my grandmother's legacy felt too passive. I needed to create something that spoke to my own journey, something that honored the true, secret spirit of the Hidden Silk Atelier. The annual Havenport Founders Day Gala was approaching. It was the biggest social event of the year, and traditionally, the Hidden Silk Atelier would showcase a small, exclusive collection. This year, all eyes were on the shop, on the mysterious new granddaughter. The pressure was immense. The original plan had been for me to present a collection of my grandmother's classic designs, a simple retrospective, but after my breakthrough, that felt hollow. I went to Helen with a new idea. "I don't want to just copy her work," I said, my voice filled with a conviction that surprised even me. "I want to create a new collection, a small one, 5 pieces. I want to call it Hidden and Seen." Helen looked at me, her expression thoughtful. I explained my concept garments that were beautiful on the surface, but held a secret element, a hidden detail that spoke to the inner life of the wearer, a story stitched into the lining. It was a direct homage to her grandmother's secret work, to the maker's mark, to my own experience. A rare, small smile touched Helen's lips. "Your grandmother would have liked that," she said. "But you have less than a month. It's impossible." "Not if you help me," I replied. And so began the most intense, exhausting, and exhilarating month of my life. I barely slept. I lived on coffee and adrenaline. My days were spent in the workshop, my nights hunched over a sketchbook, trying to translate the chaos of my feelings into tangible designs. The data analyst in me was still there, but instead of sorting numbers, I was sorting textures, colors, and concepts. The logic was still present, but now it served a creative purpose. My centerpiece, the design that I poured all of myself into, was a modern take on a traditional long dress, an ao dye. The outer layer was made of a deep indigo silk, so dark it was almost black, that shimmered with a subtle silver thread. It was elegant and restrained. The cut was asymmetrical, with one side of the split tunic flowing longer than the other, like a river current. But the secret was on the inside. For the lining, I chose the palest, most delicate silver silk, and on it, with Helen's expert guidance, I began to embroider, using a thread the color of moonlight. I painstakingly stitched a map, It wasn't a map of any real place. It was a map of the Havenport River, the waterway that wound its way through the town, a constant, flowing presence. It represented the current of identity, the idea that who we are is not a fixed point, but a journey, a flow. It was my story, the dark, public exterior, and the bright, secret, flowing interior. Noah became a frequent visitor during this time. He would stop by under the pretense of bringing coffee, but I knew he was there to see me. He never mentioned the incident with Kevin, but there was a new gentleness in his eyes, a protective quality to his presence that I found myself leaning on. He was fascinated by the creative process. He would watch me work for hours, taking candid photos of my hands sketching, of the intense concentration on my face. He documented the birth of the collection. One evening, he found me alone in the workshop, slumped over the half-finished indigo dress, exhausted and overwhelmed. "Burning the midnight oil?" he asked softly. I nodded, too tired to speak. He pulled up a stool and sat beside me, looking at the intricate map taking shape on the silver lining. "What is it?" he asked, his voice full of genuine curiosity. I hesitated, then decided to trust him. "The outside," I said, gesturing to the dark indigo silk, "is what people see. It's beautiful, but it's just the surface. This," I touched the embroidered map, "is the part they don't see. It's the journey, the current of who you really are underneath." He looked from the dress to my face, his gaze searching. The air in the workshop was thick with the scent of silk and the quiet hum of the old building. "You know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It doesn't matter to me, Leo or Leah. I know there's a story there. I don't need to know the details. I like the person I'm getting to know. I like them both." He reached out and gently placed his hand over mine, his fingers warm against my skin. It wasn't a romantic overture in the traditional sense. It was something deeper, a gesture of profound acceptance. It was a bridge across the chasm of my dual identities. In his eyes, I wasn't a man in a dress or a woman with a secret. I was just me, a whole person. Tears pricked my eyes. I didn't pull my hand away. We sat there in silence for a long time as the moonlight streamed through the large workshop windows, the simple, warm pressure of his hand on mine saying more than words ever could. It was an anchor in the swirling river of my life. From that moment on, something shifted between us, an unspoken understanding, a quiet intimacy that was both thrilling and terrifying. He saw the hidden and the seen, and he wasn't afraid. He didn't just accept both, he liked both. The week before the gala was a blur of final fittings, adjustments, and sleepless nights. The other seamstresses, Maria and Sophia, rallied around me, their loyalty and hard work a silent rebuke to Kevin's betrayal. The 5 pieces came together, each one telling a story, a jacket with a lining printed with a secret poem, a skirt with hidden pockets filled with embroidered symbols, a blouse with a collar that could be worn buttoned up and severe, or open to reveal a delicate, hand-beaded design. And then there was my indigo dress, my maker's mark, my story, rendered in silken thread. The night before the show, Noah came by to photograph the finished collection on the dress forms. The workshop was quiet, the garments glowing under the spotlights he'd set up. When he got to the indigo dress, he stopped. "It's a masterpiece, Leah," he said, his voice full of awe. "It's just a dress," I replied, my voice shaky with nerves and exhaustion. "No," he said, turning to look at me. "It's a confession, and it's the most beautiful one I've ever seen." He lifted his camera and took a picture, not of the dress, but of me. And in the reflection of the lens, for the first time, I saw myself not as Leo or Leah, but as the artist who had created this. I was the maker, and I was finally ready to show the world my design, scars and all, to be both hidden and seen, all at once, to be whole. Part 7, the show, the answer. The last day, the 100th day. It arrived not with a thunderclap, but with the quiet, misty dawn of a mid-autumn morning. The air was filled with a sense of finality, a strange mix of dread and anticipation. 100 days ago, I had been Leo Ward, data analyst, a man who lived his life in neat, predictable boxes. Today, I was Leah Ward, designer, a woman about to present her soul to the world on a runway. The Founders' Day Gala was being held in the garden behind the atelier, a space my grandmother had cultivated into a magical oasis of climbing roses and stone pathways. Tents had been erected, fairy lights were strung between the trees, and a simple, elegant runway had been set up. The whole town, it seemed, was buzzing with anticipation. Backstage, which was really just the main workshop, was a flurry of controlled chaos. Models were in various states of dress, hair and makeup artists worked with feverish intensity, and Maria and Sophia made last-minute adjustments with the calm professionalism of seasoned veterans. I stood in the middle of it all, feeling strangely serene. I was dressed in my own creation, the indigo hidden and seen gown. It felt less like a garment and more like armor, the secret map on the lining a cool, reassuring presence against my skin. Helen found me standing by the window looking out at the arriving guests. She placed a hand on my shoulder. She would be so proud. "You know," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it, not just for the designs, but for the courage. I gave her a grateful smile. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," she replied, with a rare, genuine warmth. "I just opened the door. You were the one who chose to walk through it." The show began. From my vantage point backstage, I watched as the first 4 pieces from the Hidden and Seen collection made their debut. Each one was met with a wave of appreciative murmurs, and then applause. The audience, made up of Havenport's elite, longtime clients, and even a few fashion journalists from the city, was captivated. They understood the quality, the craftsmanship, but I wondered if they understood the story. Then, it was my turn. As the final model, I was to walk the runway myself, wearing the centerpiece of the collection. My heart hammered against the tight confines of my corset. This was it, not just the culmination of the last 100 days, but the final public test. I stepped from the dimness of the workshop into the bright lights of the runway. A hush fell over the crowd. The indigo silk of the gown seemed to drink the twilight, the silver threads catching the fairy lights like captured stars. I walked slowly, deliberately, my steps sure and steady in the heels I had come to master. I kept my gaze fixed on the end of the runway, where Noah stood with his camera, his face a reassuring anchor in a sea of strangers. When I reached the end, I paused. The applause began, polite at first, then growing in strength. Among the front row guests, I saw Mr. Davies, the representative from the corporate fashion group that had been trying to buy out the atelier for years, his expression one of cool, calculating appraisal. This was the moment. I took a deep breath. Then, in one smooth, practiced motion, I gathered the asymmetrical hem of the gown. I lifted the dark indigo outer layer, revealing the shimmering silver lining beneath. A collective gasp went through the audience. Under the bright runway lights, the embroidered map of the Havenport River came alive. The moonlight-colored thread seemed to glow. A secret, intricate world suddenly exposed. I held the pose for a long moment, letting them see it, letting them see the story, the hidden made visible. Then, I turned and walked back, the applause roaring in my ears, a thunderous wave of sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the garden. It wasn't just polite appreciation anymore. It was genuine, emotional, and overwhelming. They hadn't just seen a beautiful dress. They had seen an idea. They had been let in on a secret. As I passed Mr. Davies, I saw him shake his head slightly and give a wry smile, as if conceding defeat. He knew then that the Hidden Silk Atelier was not a brand to be bought. It was a legacy to be lived. Backstage, I was enveloped in hugs from Helen, Maria, and Sophia. Noah was there, his eyes shining. He didn't say anything. He just reached out and squeezed my hand, a gesture that conveyed all the pride and affection in the world. Later, after the crowds had thinned and the garden had grown quiet again, Mr. Abernathy found me. He was holding a familiar-looking manila envelope. "Day 100, he said, his face holding the faintest hint of a smile. "You've done it, Leo. Or should I say Leah?" "Either is fine," I said, and I realized with a jolt that it was true. The names were just labels. I knew who I was now. He handed me the envelope. "Your grandmother left one final letter. to be opened only upon successful completion of the 100 days. My hands trembled slightly as I broke the seal. The scent of lavender and silk filled the air one last time. My dearest child, if you are reading this, then you have done it. You have walked in her shoes, and you now stand at the end of the path. I imagine you are expecting me to talk about the inheritance, about the business, about your future. But the truth is, the atelier was never the real inheritance. It was just the classroom. The 100 days were not the real condition either. That was just the exam. The true condition was always a simple question, a question I hope you have been asking yourself every step of the way. Are you happy? That's all I ever wanted for you, my love, for you to break out of your safe, black and white world and find the color, the texture, the hidden beauty in yourself and in others, for you to understand that identity is not a fixed point, but a flowing river. I didn't care if you became Leah forever, or if you went back to being Leo. I just wanted you to know that you could be both, that you contained multitudes. The real legacy is not the shop, it is the freedom to be your own creator, to take the wounds and the secrets and embroider them into something beautiful. So, are you happy? I hope with all my heart the answer is yes. With all my love, forever, Grandma Rose. Tears streamed down my face, smudging the makeup I had long since forgotten I was wearing. I looked up, past the fairy lights, to the starry night sky. Yes, Grandma, I thought, I am. I wasn't Leo anymore. I wasn't Leah anymore. I was just me, a person made whole by the experience of being fractured, a person who understood that the most beautiful things in life are the ones with a hidden story, a secret map stitched into the lining. The hidden silk atelier did not get sold. It thrived. It became known not just for its beauty, but for its message, for its quiet celebration of the complex, layered nature of identity. The new tagline for the shop, which Noah helped me create, said it all. Identity is a river. It flows, not fixed. I never went back to being just Leo, and I didn't stay as Leah. I found a space in between, a comfortable, fluid existence. Some days I presented as Leo, some as Leah, to my friends, to Noah, to myself. I was simply the person who ran the beautiful little shop in Havenport, the one who made incredible clothes that told stories. The journey from shame to acceptance, from playing a role to simply existing, was complete. The physical transformation had been just a bridge, and I had crossed it to find a far more profound transformation of the soul. My grandmother had given me her inheritance, and it had nothing to do with money and everything to do with freedom.